the frustrations about busing right now that we're seeing in these blue cities, these blue states where they're spending all these resources, those are for asylum seekers. And I think a lot of people don't realize that just because someone came here without papers and that they didn't get a green light, like to come here, that there's all these different ways people enter the country. Those people that are getting bused to Denver and Chicago and New York, they're not here as someone who like hopped the fence.
Margaret Carmel, you're back.
I'm back.
God bless it. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for coming back. How's the summer going for you?
It's going really great. I've been going camping, doing all the fun Idaho things. So it's always good when the sun comes out.
Yeah. Get this a little bit closer. The people want to hear from you, Margaret.
People want to hear from
people want to hear from you. Okay, listen. All of the summer things, including Eagle Fun Days, which is a thing because there has been so much distress with the downtown construction. That's been an issue. A lot of the businesses down there are getting through it, but then you have things like Old State Saloon, which is crushing with heterosexual Pride Month, which is great. Unfortunately, that month is over for them. Back to normal reality business and back to Eagle. Eagle has now become, it's the first anti-sanctuary city in the state of Idaho. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about that. It wouldn't surprise me if there's some other cities around the state that have passed this resolution, but
not the first.
I don't know for sure, but they have definitely put out a line in the sand and said they are not going to be a sanctuary city, and that is something that made headlines this past month.
Okay, walk me through this. First off, what does it mean to be an anti-sanctuary city, right? Specifically.
Okay, so a sanctuary city is not, there's not really a specific definition of what a sanctuary city is, but it's more like an umbrella term. And what a sanctuary city is, it's when a city says, we're going to lessen our cooperation with the federal government to enforce immigration law. That can look like a bunch of different things. That can mean if someone is in our jail who is in the country illegally, we're just not going to let the federal government know. Or if the federal government asks us for information about someone who, might be in the country illegally, we won't give them that information. The idea is like, we don't agree with, the federal government deporting people or any number of level of collaboration, or things like that. It's basically a city saying, we just don't want to engage with federal law enforcement on this issue. Unless it's something, really, really egregious or et cetera. And so different cities are going to define that, different ways. It often has to do with the jail because that's when federal law enforcement often will, find out about someone who's in the country illegally if they are picked up for a crime of some sort.
Gotcha. So that's the idea of a sanctuary city, which is like, we're not going to participate in something that would potentially lead to deportation or just bring the federal government in on this.
Right. We want to just do local laws, local stuff, and let the feds do whatever they're going to do and not really work with them. And so Eagle's resolution that they passed was basically saying, it was a resolution. They said, we will not become a sanctuary city. We will never be a sanctuary city. And we're not going to use, and they said they were concerned about the transportation of undocumented immigrants being transported to Eagle, and that we're not going to use any taxpayer money to help them out. And really that is a big response to, from what I can read in the resolution and some of the testimony that happened at city council, people encouraging the city to do this. People are concerned about, what we've seen in other blue cities where migrants that are crossing the border down in Mexico, the governor of Texas has created a program where they're taking these migrants, they're putting them on buses, and they're dumping them in liberal cities.
Like Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah, exactly. He's basically, because it's important to explain the context of this. If they want to come to this country, there's a system called asylum, where let's say you are, under political some sort of danger, political prosecution,
danger, things like that. Yeah.
Persecution, danger from cartels, literally anything. You feel like your life is in danger in your country. There's a legal process in this country where you can show up at the door of the United States and you can say, I'm in danger in my country. Please let me live here. Please, talking about the Statue of Liberty, give me, what's the quote? Give me your poor, all these things, right? That's kind of part.
We're terrible Americans. We don't even know the quote.
Yeah, exactly. Epic fail of the day.
Yeah, right.
So, but you know what I'm referencing. And so the idea behind this asylum program is it is legal for someone to come to the United States, knock on the door effectively and say, I'm in danger. Please let me live in this country. And there's a program that, that Joe Biden sort of rolled back that forced those people who were waiting to hear back on the decision, their court case, if they'd allowed to come in the United States, that they had to stay in Mexico. They had to stay on the Mexico side while they waited.
And that was something, I'm sorry to interrupt, that was something I believe initiated by Trump, correct?
Right.
Which is like, hey, we will consider your request 100%. You're just not going to hang out in our lobby while we do that. You're going to hang out where you were. And then you had that mass caravan coming up from Central America that essentially got stopped at the Mexico border. And then like Mexico had to deal with it, essentially. MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.
Right. And so, and that program, I think they called it the Remain in Mexico program. I think it was also due to COVID. We have COVID, we have a pandemic. We want you guys to stay on the Mexico side of the border. Joe Biden rolled that back as COVID protections have, rolled back, was yes, while you're waiting for asylum, you can legally be in the United States while we decide. That is something that the President Biden decided to do. And that was really frustrating to, Governor Abbott down in Texas, because he's like, I don't want all these people sitting here in Texas. He was opposed to it. He felt like it was overwhelming their public safety resources. So he said, you know what, I'm going to be trolling the blue states and take these people that are all waiting and they're on their court cases, put them on a bus and dump them in Denver, dump them in Chicago, dump them in Martha's Vineyard, and say, yeah, blue states, you support more immigration from Mexico. Here's all these people. And these folks don't have work permits. They're not allowed to work. They don't have, they don't have money. They don't have a place to live. And that's why they're living in camps on the street. If you go to Denver, you drive in downtown Denver, sometimes these migrants, they will offer to wash your windows for you because they're trying to make money because they can't go to McDonald's and get a job or go to Chick-fil-A and get a job. So anyways, it's all just like setting up for this. So there's concerns from people who are concerned about that migrants were going to be bused to Eagle, and this concern that there would be some taxpayer money used to, which is something blue cities and states are doing, to say, let's help these people. They're here, they're homeless. Let's use some public resources to like address these people who just got dumped in our streets. And that's kind of the context around this. This resolution seemed to be focused on like the mass busing of migrants here.
Okay, got it. It was my understanding, and again, perhaps it's both, and perhaps I'm totally wrong. It was my understanding that the response or the resolution was more focused on illegal immigrants. And again, instead of asylum people who are legally allowed to be here, they just can't work and they can't do other things. It was my understanding that there was an anxiety around, no, people that are not here waiting on asylum, that are here illegally, are getting shipped into this area for work or other things and being shipped into, cause problems or bring drugs or things of that nature. But that's distinct from an asylum seeker who is legally allowed to be, at least at this stage in the game, legally allowed to be in the United States.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because I think that the frustrations about busing right now that we're seeing in these blue cities, these blue states where they're spending all these resources, those are for asylum seekers. And I think a lot of people don't realize that just because someone came here without papers and that they didn't get a green light, like to come here, that there's all these different ways people enter the country. Those people that are getting bused to Denver and Chicago and New York, they're not here as someone who like hopped the fence, for lack of a better phrase, but in terms of like, I think there's I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories right now about mass busing of people. Again, those folks who aren't asylum seekers, who just cross the border, getting shipped here. Like and that's going to be very different than like what we've seen for headlines of things that the governor of Texas is doing to move these migrants around. And so the Eagle resolution was focused on undocumented immigrants, people without approval, to be in the United States. But it was also talking about, again, the transportation of people here. Right.
And that the transportation, obviously, it's the infamous video that went around Fairview and 5 Mile outside the China Buffet.
Right.
With the allegation that, hey, 3 busloads of people just got 3 busloads of illegal immigrants just got dropped off at Fairview and 5 Mile. And it was a panning video of outside the China Buffet with Hispanic looking people. I don't know if they were Hispanic or not. But anyway, that video sparked so much anxiety for people that I've spoken with and around the area. And people were like, we have to do something about this. Now, I actually did reach out to Sheriff Clifford and asked him directly and asked if I could talk about it on this conversation with you, saying like, look, did you guys, is there any report of mass importation or transportation of illegal immigrants into this area? And he said overwhelmingly, no, there is no documented report of mass transportation of illegal immigrants into Ada County. That Fairview and 5 Mile incident, he in fact said they heard about it, reached out to ICE, and they reported back that the people that were outside the China buffet, part of that bus caravan, were actually in transport to Oregon legally on, I think it's like
H-2A visas.
There we go. Yeah, they're here. They absolutely are citizens of other nations, but they are legally moving through the United States with work permits to go and work in an agricultural setting. And they stopped for food. Like that was it. They had to get out of the bus to get the China buffet or whatever else they were eating. And then they got back on and they were in transit to Oregon. So that anxiety that people were like, oh my gosh, we're being overrun by illegal immigrants. It's like you literally just took a small video of a bunch of migrant workers that are legally being transported, not even to this state. And by the way, look around. We're in the middle of agricultural hub. Like, who do you think tassels, whatever it is, corn stalks, and like cow and bull rows? I don't know all the nuances, but I know it takes a lot of labor. That's something that seems to really grip people, and that, at least in part, seems to be one of the driving factors in the anti-sanctuary. Yeah,
and I want to be clear that about something that's, I know that there's a lot of your viewers, or really anyone particularly in Idaho, a lot of distrust for people like me from the mainstream media reporting on this issue. I mean, I tweeted about this story and I had a lot of people saying, well, clearly you're not investigating this. Clearly you're just trying to defend illegal immigration because, you're part of the liberal media, all these things. And I understand that distrust. I understand why people don't trust the media, or they might not trust me. But I can assure you that if this was an issue, if we had documented reports, you would see what you see in Denver and Chicago and New York and Martha's Vineyard. You would see people like camps on the street because that's the only place these people can go. You would see officials like sheriffs and mayors and the governor making comments about it because we just got a bunch of people dumped on our doorstep that we now need to take care of. And I can assure you that if this was happening, I and every other reporter would be reporting on it. And I would just caution people, it is really easy nowadays where everything feels like a conspiracy to see a really small video of something or a misleading post or a bus and a dark street on Facebook. And, we had rumors about this in East Idaho too. And all the law enforcement out there said, no, we don't have any reports of this. It's really easy to see those little clips and jump to a conclusion, particularly whenever there's a lot of fear and anxiety about immigration right now.
Right.
And especially when we're in an election year. And it's just like, I would just really encourage you. You don't even have to take my word for it. I would like you to, but you don't have to take my word for it. If you're concerned about a bus of people that you saw, a post you saw on Facebook, I bet your local law enforcement, your sheriff like Matt Clifford, or your police chief or whatever, I bet they've seen the same post. And if you reach out, they can give you more information and they can share with you, they're seeing these reports too, and they're concerned about this as well.
Right.
And so and I say this all not to criticize the city of Eagle. They are.
Oh, sure.
No,
sure.
They have their values and they're taking their stand on their values. And that's why I reported on the story.
Right.
Because I think it's important for people, the same way that I wrote a story on the city of Boise issuing a resolution related to Roe versus Wade and abortion. They're taking a stand on their values. I'm also going to report on Eagle taking a stand on their values because I think people deserve to know what their city stands for and what they're doing.
Sure. And to your end, and I don't mean to interrupt, but to your point, I don't you want to be an anti-sanctuary city? Awesome. I'm not even an Eagle resident, but awesome, because I saw very clearly what happened with the emphasis of sanctuary cities in other states. It's not great, right? It's not good. And that's fine. You can have your anti-sanctuary. I just also think it's bad to overinflate the anxiety that people have towards illegal immigration with things like, hey, we live in an agricultural setting. We have migrant workers. And I'm sure we have illegal immigrant workers here as well. And that's not good. And we should find and prosecute those people. 100%. To that end, in fact, Sheriff Clifford also said that the number of illegal immigrants that are populated in the Ada County Jail is decreasing. So from his metrics, there are fewer illegal immigrants coming through the criminal justice system in Ada County, which is obviously his jurisdiction. So that's good. Like, we have a decreased number. I don't think because we are enforcing fewer laws, but from his standpoint, it's like we see just less illegal immigrant crime that we get, interact with. So like, awesome. If Eagle wants to be anti-sanctuary, awesome. And like, same thing with Old State Saloon. Like, I actually reached out to Mark Fitzpatrick and invited him on the show, and we couldn't line up. Invitation is still open, by the way. But up until this point, we haven't been able to line up a time for him to come in. I love the freedom engaged here, right? I also just really want people to have a sense of reality when it comes to, are there busloads of illegal immigrants getting dropped off in our midst? And from everything that has been reported from official channels, the answer is no. Now, if you think the official channel is just some guy on Instagram, that's fine too. That's on you. But like, from the Sheriff Clifford and ICE and everyone else, like, the answer is no, that's not actually happening.
Right. And I think it's, everyone's going to have a variety of views on this issue. And it's not, and for me as a reporter, I really take this seriously. It's not my job to really prescribe to someone what their views should be.
Sure.
But there's a lot of misinformation about the immigration system, what's legal, what's not. Like, a lot of people, again, I took so much time to explain what an asylum seeker is, because a lot of people don't realize that's even, like, the folks who are coming to the border, that is legally something they're allowed to do, which is petition our government to let them live here. Whether we allow them to live here or not, that's going to be decided by the feds.
Right.
But like, that ability to ask, can I come inside? Like, that is a legal thing that is their right to do.
Right.
And so I think and a lot of people's like, well, I didn't even know that, and that's, or a lot of people don't know that there are very few legal channels to become a citizen of the United States. There's no right, there's few right ways, to do it. So there's a lot of misinformation about that. So for me as a reporter, my job, I see it as, I'm not here to tell Matt Todd or the Eagle City Council or the city of Boise or literally anybody how we should be talking about, about this issue. That's not my job. So I'm not here to pass judgment. It's just, here's the context in which this resolution was passed. And then also, we haven't seen this issue here the way we've seen it in blue cities, largely because we're a red state.
Right.
And so it's important to keep all of that, in mind. And I encourage anyone who has questions about this issue or doubts what I'm saying, or, please reach out to me. I'm happy to dialogue with you about it. I'm also, if you don't believe me, you don't want to dialogue with me about it, that's fine. Go talk to your local law enforcement partners. I'm sure they will, provide you some information, and the sheriff's office can talk with you as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just call the people. Like, if you feel that there are a bunch of criminals getting dropped off at Fairview and 5 Mile, if there are a bunch of criminals, there's got to be some law enforcement agency that's like, yep, those are criminals. And I know they're criminals because I, have charged them or I did whatever. Like, that's fine. Just talk to people. Don't just take it off Twitter, or X rather.
Yeah. And so I think it's, and that's really, like, again, what I'm trying to do is, share information. And that's why I did a story on the resolution, because people deserve to know what values their government holds and the context in which they hold those values. Did you,
this is the first time I've heard you kind of defend or articulate your position. Did you take a lot of heat for writing that article?
I had a lot of people criticizing, me on Twitter and saying, or X, as you say, or as we all should be saying now, not believing, that I said we haven't seen reports of the busing, and sharing that clip of the 5 Mile bus incident and basically doubting what I had to say about it. And I had several back and forths with people about it, explaining, well, they're probably here with the H-2A program. No one has provided any proof that these are undocumented people. And I had some people, there's one woman who I'm going to give her, really kudos. She was pretty upset with me in my mentions about, and I wrote back to her and I said, no, you're talking about a different facet of immigration. And I sort of explained, some different ways that people come into this country. And she was like, oh, thanks. I learned something new. Thanks for sharing this information. And then she was in my mentions kind of defending me against some of these other people who were, saying that I was towing a line of, Joe Biden conspiracy theories. She was saying, no, Margaret's just sharing information.
Man, good for you.
She's and it's because like I earnestly mean this, and whether people believe that about me or not, that's fine. I really just want people to have good information about their world. How they choose to act on that is completely fine with me. Like you can act on all this however you want. But I think the world functions better if instead of looking at clips that are meant to scare us on the internet and then jumping 50 feet ahead to a conclusion, we're learning how the world works. We have information. We have the tools. So then you can go vote. You can talk to your officials. You can be in the world in an informed way. And that's what gets me up in the morning. I think we all do better as a society if we're acting with information, we're acting with facts, and we have these like unbiased sources of people they can go to and get information. And I really want to be that person for people in a community to say, I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're in the Constitution Party. I want to answer your questions so you can be a good citizen. Right.
Let's just provide information.
Correct.
You make the omelet however you want to make it. I just want to give you the raw ingredients.
Yeah, and that's something that and so that's why like I spend a lot of time like writing back and forth with people sometimes on X or in my email. Maybe that sometimes people will say, wow, you really are willing to write back and forth with people longer than I would, and say, because like I want to share that information, and maybe that person isn't receptive to it, but maybe someone reading my reply will be.
Right.
And, I really want to be a good resource and just help. I think it helps democracy that people know who they're voting for and why and how these things work. There's a really good quote that I saw. It's like, if you don't know how anything works, then everything's a conspiracy.
Right.
And I think I see that operate all the time, where it's like, I understand why people get really freaked out about something they see online. And then I say, okay, well, let's break it down.
Right.
This might be the first time that you're really like engaging with, I don't know, all these municipal things that I'm dealing with.
Right.
Municipal budgets, planning and zoning, land use, an election process, or immigration, or all these things. And if you've never really worked on this topic, everything seems confusing and all these dots are connecting and it seems like there's a plot around every corner. 9 times out of 10, if you break down all the component parts of all of the things that we're dealing with, it's like, oh, that makes sense to me.
Right. Right. Secretary of State McGrain mentioned that somebody had told him that there were a bunch of busloads of Democrats busing people into Boise to vote. And he was like, he initially even like kind of flipped about it. And then he realized the person was genuinely serious. He's like, okay, well, listen, first off, if you're busing a bunch of Democrats into Boise, you're busing them into the wrong place to make an impact because they're already blue in Boise. It was like, wrong location. Second, let's just walk through all of these checks and balances that like, what about voter registration? What about IDs? What about like all these different things? And he said once he took the time to walk through with that person, they're like, okay, I guess it just doesn't make sense. But people are very taken by the anxiety provoking information that they engage with either on social medias or just people telling them. And again, if they haven't had substantial engagement with these institutions, they're not going to know what the checks and balances are.
Yeah. And it's like, obviously we could talk about examples like this forever, but I always thought about during 2020 when there were so many election integrity questions.
Right.
And a lot of folks were earnestly like looking at election result websites, local election result websites. They've never looked at an election site before. And they're getting upset because they're seeing a lot of things that don't make any sense. Like as someone said to me, like, it doesn't make any sense. They update, they update, 50, 60 precincts at once. They just dump all the votes on the website all at once. It's like, yeah, as someone who looks at those websites every single year for all these local elections, that's what happens. You have 10 precincts counted and then all of a sudden it's 70. Because they're processing that quickly and it takes them that long to put in the computer. And, and you talk to someone like Phil McGrain or Clerk Triple, and they're going to break that down. And they're really good at saying, especially in Idaho, where we've shown time and time again, we have secure elections and we have a very conservative state. They're going to say, no, this is just how our system works. And then once you're willing to like see that stuff and break it down and see all these component parts, it's like, do you know how your car works?
Right.
No.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's not a conspiracy that it turns on.
Right. Do you know how your air conditioner works? Like I have a very dear friend actually. His wife was an asylum seeker from Iran when she was, I think, like 6 or something. So it was in the late 80s. And so her mom brought her over. Her dad had to stay there. Her mom brought her over. They sought asylum. They were granted asylum. And then my friend met her in college. He's a German physicist. She's an Iranian engineer, which is hilarious. And they, get together. And he for his PhD program at Georgia was making an air conditioner that ran off of gas, like natural gas. So he's like, so instead of dealing with electricity to run this compression cycle, we're going to use combustion. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, no, you just light this up. You light the gas on fire and then you have a exchange. I'm like, I don't know what you just said to me, right? And it's this incredible process, but it's like, this is a simple thing that the gas companies were funding to do research to figure out, can we get a commercially viable or like essentially a residential, can like York install air conditioners that run off natural gas instead of running off, electricity for the compression cycle. It's like, that's wild to me. And again, these are simple things that we rely on every single day, have no idea how they work. One thing that I want to say in relation to this, exactly what you're talking about. The cobalt mining in Idaho. God bless it. Another viral video that went out with, I think it was like Mad Attack 009, accusing Idaho's water districts of stopping the pumps or ordering the farmers that operate off pumps to stop pumping because there was Ukrainian defense funding coming to the cobalt mines that were using half a million gallons of water a day or something. It's like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I got very thankfully, I was able to get TJ Budge, the attorney representing the pump farmers, to come on and articulate like, no, this is what's going on. And there are no cobalt mines that are pumping from the Snake Plains aquifer. Like, those are totally using a completely different water system. There's nobody with a straw into this aquifer that's like pumping water out for cobalt mines. But again, the number of people that sent that to me and were flipped out saying like, this is the United States government coming in and like ruining Idaho's food independence. It's like, guys, like this is a really complex situation. And you break it down and a lot of people realized, oh, that's not it. Now, some people are not going to be convinced no matter what you say, which is fine. But again, just at the very least, presenting the information. And TJ was wonderful. He was literally like Zooming with me from his car because it was like he had no time to physically come to me. But yeah, just little videos like that derail people and it's too complex for them to understand what's actually happening.
Yeah. And I would just, kind of a closing comment here. I would really just caution anybody to see and that's whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this sort of applies to everyone. If you see a video that taps into something you're very afraid of and really like hits on something that like it confirms all of your beliefs and yet doesn't provide any proof and isn't from a legitimate source, question it. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean that these things are always wrong. But it's always good to take these things at face value and take a bit before you send it to all, everyone and your grandkids. Take a bit and go, does this make sense? Is this reported by any sort of mainstream source, even Fox or NBC or MSNBC? Or is this something that I'm seeing headlines about elsewhere? Is this something that, do I know someone who maybe knows about this topic?
Right.
Like, those are good things to stop. And I mean this for Democrats. I mean this for Republicans.
Oh, this is not
partisan.
No.
And I think we're all, because our brains are wired to see something. It's a confirmation bias. Our brains are wired to see something that we agree with and latch onto it because it makes us feel good.
Right. 100%.
It makes us feel like all of our fears are validated.
Right.
Whether that's about cobalt mines, whether that's about people at the China buffet, or that's about an election or the mayor of our town.
Right.
I mean, and so it's always a really good idea to just take a second and go, does this make sense? And then check it out.
Right.
Because then what if you shared a video that was not right and it made a bunch of people freak out? Then you're kind of culpable in causing anxieties. But then if you take a minute and do some research and go, okay, hold up, this doesn't quite check out. then you can help stop that cycle of misinformation and help calm things down a little bit. And you can be part of the solution of all this angst and tension that we're facing in this country. And it's like just taking 1 second to question something and to be willing to admit that there's a lot of things in the world that we all don't understand how they work can really save you a lot of grief.
I don't know if you have time, but if you have time, you wrote one more article. You've written many, but one more that I want to hit on, which was the Chick-fil-A and Eagle.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the situation, because there was like a large reverse course with Chick-fil-A. Talk to me about Chick-fil-A. Okay, so Margaret, here's the deal. We're in different clothes because we recorded our episode that was talking about a bunch of different things, including the Chick-fil-A snafu, about a week or two ago. And it hasn't published yet. And then on Tuesday, the Eagle City Council held a city council meeting, and things changed. So instead of burning the entire episode, we're just augmenting the Chick-fil-A part. So for the people watching, that's why we don't look the same. And this episode obviously just cut to like a completely different conversation. But the initial conversation that we had was outlining the fact that there was a developer that was, getting approval for some stuff, and nobody knew who the tenant was, but the tenant turned out to be Chick-fil-A because of some Freedom of Information Act. I believe that was on your doing. There we go. So you find out the tenant's Chick-fil-A, and then the city council approves it initially, approves them to go forward with their bid, and then reverses course and says, hey, I actually think we need to reconsider this. Chick-fil-A people were like, you can't do that. Like, you already said it was okay. You can't reverse course. Next city council meeting comes around, and they do in fact make a motion. Is that correct? They make a motion to?
Yeah, well, okay. It's actually, it's a little bit more complicated. Okay. So initially,
give the background, and then we'll just give the update from Tuesday.
Of course. So whenever the city council reconsidered the vote, one of the things they did was they said, actually, we want to come back. We want to do another public hearing. And we want to talk about the architecture of the building. We want to talk about traffic, and we want to talk about, I think it was the landscape buffering around. So, and that would set up another hearing to potentially either turn the project down again officially, or potentially approve it just with a ton of conditions. And the developer said, okay, well, we still think this entire process is illegal. We object to it, but sure, we'll play ball.
Right, which is the entire process after they approved it. Yeah. So they approved it, then they said, hey, we need to set up another hearing to like consider a bunch of these things. And they're like, you already said it was okay.
And that's where so the developer said, yeah, we're still going to sue you, but because we think the process that you went through was improper, but sure, we'll go through this new hearing. Why not? And they showed up, they made some changes, and they took out one of the drive-thrus that was going to be in this large shopping center. So now it's going to be from 4 drive-thru restaurants to 3. They added some landscape buffering, and they changed the exterior of the building. And even then, at first, 3 of the 4 council members, except for Councilmember Craig Kwame, said, yeah, I'm still not happy with this. I think there's too much traffic. I don't, Councilmember Mary May straight up said, I don't really buy your traffic analysis math, that this dropped traffic, 30% from what's already approved on the property. Very skeptical. And it looks like they were gonna vote it down again.
And again, this is on Tuesday night. Okay, so there was the initial hearing where they said yes, then a large snafu, people came back, they reconsidered, and they said no. Chick-fil-A said, okay, I think that's illegal. You can't do this. There was the big discussion of, okay, well, let's have another assessment hearing about landscaping, drive-through, exterior facade of the building. That's what happened on Tuesday night.
Correct.
Great.
And that's where Chick-fil-A is coming in, or the developer of the Chick-fil-A is coming in and saying, look, we did all these changes to the traffic and the landscape and the building. What do you think now? We still rigorously oppose the fact that we're even here right now, but what do you think of the changes that we made? And 3 of those 4 council members was still saying, no, too much traffic. I'm not happy. I'm concerned about safety. I'm concerned about everyone flying in and out of all these little roads.
Yeah, right.
I'm worried about it. And then John Renison, who's a developer associated with the project, gets up there and he makes kind of one last stand and just says, hey, so we already got approval to build this shopping center. I think it was in 2016. And we have another plan that you guys have already approved. We're just trying to change the plan and make it better. So if you turn us down on this Chick-fil-A, and the project also was revealed to have a Panera in it, if you
The new project you're
this
saying?
new
Okay.
project, if you turn us down on this Chick-fil-A Panera shopping center, we're going to go do something you don't like. And it's going to have more traffic according to our analysis. And then developers will say, well, and we couldn't get as favorable a mix of tenants, in their phrase, that would be catering to more lower income folks. They didn't name specific businesses, but usually that's going to be like, that reference would be like tobacco shops, the big smoke beer type places, maybe a vape store. I don't know, a vape store, you kind of like lower quality type businesses that maybe people would not like less. That is a card that the developer played and said, well, if you don't like Chick-fil-A and Panera, we could do something. We've already got approval in the book to do something that's going to have more traffic and with businesses you guys don't even like, that you don't want on your main drag coming into town. And they went, and all right, let's vote on it. And they go to vote. It was a little bit dramatic because they go to vote, and Council President Russell was still a no, and Council Member Kwame was still a yes, and then Council Member May said, I'm going to pass. And then Council Member Melissa Gindelsberger also passed, and we're sitting there going, well, what are they going to do? And May said, I still don't like this. I'm going to vote no. But Gindelsberger changed her vote and said, you know what? I'm going to support it. And she did not she did not really elaborate on what caused her to change her mind. So I don't know exactly what led her to pass on that vote and then change her mind. But because it was then 2-2 with Gindelsberger and Kwame both supporting the project, then Mayor Pike came in and broke the tie once again, which he did in that first approval, except with a different mix of council members, to say, yes, we're going to do this. And Mayor Pike, and he really laid out his philosophy that was a big thing that was different between him and former Mayor Pierce during the campaign. He before the vote, he said, we can't have just dirt lots in the city of Eagle. And he said, I think it's bad for the tax base. We need commercial development. We need to bring in more services and more tax revenue to do more services for people and help with property tax relief and economic development. And again, you remember back to former Mayor Pierce, he was really, staunchly against trying to attract new chains and new businesses to come into Eagle. He wanted to grow what was already here. He wasn't wanting to be as aggressive with bringing new businesses in because he wanted things to stay small and stay essentially as they are in many ways. And so Pike really put, kind of a flag in the ground, like, no, I'm pro businesses opening here, new businesses coming, economic development, commercial development. Let's do it. And so they got that approval, and the developers, put out a statement. They told me, they said, yep, we're really happy the city came around. This is going to be good for everybody. And so that's what's going to happen now. The lawsuit is still in the books. I asked the developer, I said, are you guys going to retract this? And the developer said, I don't remember his exact phrasing, but he told me that they plan to maybe rescind that suit once everything kind of all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So that's where we're at. I mean, it's been quite a roller coaster. It's been a long time. I can't think of a development project that has gone through this many yes, no, maybe so. So it's been really interesting, and it's even more interesting because Chick-fil-A is a restaurant that so many people are really passionate about and interested in, and because of that, it creates traffic.
Right. Very similar to the In-N-Out issue, except, with beef, chicken mix up. So, and again, to be clear, this developer got the okay to have the original development from a review back in 2016. This whole reconsideration or this whole consideration process that was started was just because they wanted to tweak it. They already had been approved in former administrations to go ahead and develop that area. They were just saying, hey, look, I want to tweak this and I want to tweak this. And that's what started the reconsideration process.
Right. And so they wanted to change what's known as a development agreement, which is essentially an agreement that as a developer you have with the city, which says not just I got approval to rezone this property, but here's specifically what I'm going to do with it. And the reason you have a development agreement is so that cities have a lot of control over, as opposed to just saying, sure, you can build commercial there. It gives cities a lot of control over what's the layout. What kind of How many drive-throughs can we have? Where will there be walkable paths?
Right.
All these little things. And so this was the developer saying, okay, so we got approval for this. And since we got approval X years ago, the whole commercial market has changed, and we've been waiting. John Rennison, the developer, he talked about, he's like, we've been waiting to bring in, high quality tenants, like that, essentially waiting for Eagle to grow enough for these bigger, the right mix of restaurants and businesses to want to come in.
Right.
And that's why you look at that lot, and there's that senior living community on the far northeast corner, I think. And that's because that was part of that initial approval, and then they've been waiting to develop the commercial. And oftentimes you see this with projects where residential will develop first. I mean, you see this in Harris Ranch right now. You're probably going to see this here in Dry Creek with that commercial lot at the entrance. That's probably going to take a little bit to develop because, we talked about this early in the conversation. Developers that are developing commercial, they want people nearby
Right.
to go to their business and spend money. And so oftentimes you'll see that residential portion build out first, and then commercial will lag as, developers use the term rooftops come up. And Eagle has grown so much, since this project initially came. And that's why the developer is wanting that development agreement changed so they can do new things with it. And that's really why we've been at council.
Man, it's wild. It's wild. I hope everything works out for them because, again, like wiping a lawsuit off the books would be fantastic. And, everybody, obviously you had a split decision within the council. Mayor breaks a tie, but, hopefully it works out. And hopefully for the people that are worried about it, their concerns don't come to fruition and, everybody just makes money. But that's the update with the Chick-fil-A. I can't remember exactly if we had a lot we talked about afterwards, but because I haven't produced the episode yet, but back to the regular scheduled programming. Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you for letting me do an update now.
I actually wanted to ask you, what has transpired with the Eagle Senior Center organization lawsuit?
Yeah, so Eagle's been involved in a couple legal matters now. I feel like every meeting they have an executive session to talk about pending or threatening litigation. The senior center issue, I believe, is still ongoing, but I don't have the latest details on that. The Home Depot lawsuit.
The storage and the parking lot stuff. Yeah,
that's settled. Several months ago, I believe. So that got settled out. There was the suit related to the Arts Commission. There were several lawsuits that have floated around. Like Eagle and lawsuits has been in the news, and so this is kind of another one of legal matters where people are just they're in tension with people in the community. This time it's a developer bringing a suit to them, but we've seen this happen a couple times now, and depending on how this goes, the attorneys, they put in their demand letter, their complaint, that they wanted legal fees for this. And the developer hired Givens Pursley. They're not cheap. And so Eagle, depending on how the suit comes out, Eagle could give a payout for this. And we don't know how, if they could have other, legal issues as well. And again, they've been in court a lot. So we'll see what's going to happen with this, but it really speaks to just the tension in the community. And you can see it on the social media comments. Half the comments on the story were, yay, I love Chick-fil-A, and I'm glad it's coming here. And the other half were, oh, I don't want chains. I don't want cars. I don't want fast food. I want good, wholesome Eagle stuff that we've had for decades. And I think that is something that the city is like dealing with. And now, and this council coming out and kind of trying to navigate a very divided city on this issue, I think is what resulted in this suit. Yeah. Because they said, okay, fine, we'll approve it. And then, oh, wait a minute, maybe this matter isn't as settled as we thought. And that potentially could have gotten them in trouble with the law.
Right. But those magnet spots, like it's generally the larger national chains that are magnets for development. And there is development going in. We need more commercial, not just like in the abstract, but for instance, speaking with Dorothy Miller of Hope Blooms Flowers, she was saying like she was saying of her shop, we outgrew the shop years ago and there's just no other place to go. So it's like we need more commercial spaces for existing buildings, and those commercial spaces generally need magnet spots that, are a larger recognizable chain places that attract people. And I don't know, man, what a problem.
Yeah, and that's what the developer was saying about Chick-fil-A is that you need that anchor. I think we've all been there where you're like, well, like for me, it's the Best Buy development on Franklin where I'm going to Best Buy or I'm going to the Michaels over there.
Yeah, right.
And then I'm in there and then I'm like, well, I see another business. I might as well. I always see that Tree City smoothie place while I'm there at Best Buy or Michaels. And I say, dang it, reeled me in. I'm gonna go spend some money because that smoothie sounds great.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and that, but if I was just at home, I probably and I wasn't going to that large chain, I probably wouldn't go in the smoothie store and spend too much money.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of, that's what developers are often doing. They're trying to build a mixed use product that has those magnets that like I like that word, that drag you in there. Yeah. And then, oh, now I'm a loose wallet. I'm spending money. Right. I'm doing this.
And by the way, the smoothie place probably wouldn't go in either if they're like, there's nothing drawing people here. Like the magnets work with each other, right? Like all the different makeup you have to have. For instance, there's a commercial development that's slotted to go into my neighborhood. And everybody keeps saying like, why don't we just get, small, mom and pop shops? And it's like, well, the mom and pop shops aren't dumb. They know that like the possibility of them surviving is going to be significantly reduced unless there's a large magnet there, like an Albertsons or something, or a larger chain. And you have to have these things working together. It's not just the developers. It's also the people that are putting their, fortune, for lack of a better term, in investing in businesses and getting a brick and mortar shop, which is a difficult thing to do at best of times. They're going to take a big risk. They're going to want a magnet there too.
Yeah. And we'll see how this all plays out, over time. But I think Eagle is going to have to do a lot of thinking about what do we want? And then what are developers willing to do? Because and what pencils for them, right. Because they're not going to do anything that doesn't make them any money. And so, also I find this to be sort of a paradox where I talk to people all the time who are like, I don't want chains. I only want local businesses. I'm so tired of seeing, all these new chain restaurants up instead of local places or local shops to buy clothes. Sure. And I just like, well, how often do you order from Amazon?
Where are you putting your dollars?
Where are you putting your dollars? When is the last time you shopped at a local boutique to go buy your clothes instead of a chain? Or, right. Where do you order your Christmas gifts? And again, I'm not passing a judgment because I do the same thing.
Right. We're just saying like, look, these are the mechanisms by which you will attract more local business. If you spend money locally, that will attract more local business. If you spend more money on Amazon because it's convenient or for whatever reason, you will dissuade local business.
Yeah. And so I think it's always important whenever I always encourage, like people love to say, you see this in media surveys, you see this in all kinds of things where people sort of over report, like they say they want all these things, but then you look at their behavior and it's like, well, are you really like encouraging that and doing all this stuff? Like I'm really into shopping local businesses because my job, I interview a lot of local businesses. It's like, I want to support them. Particularly when I used to live in a really small town where it's like, this is our community.
Listen,
and so
I want to lose 10 pounds, but Stella's is off the hook. Like this is the reality. Yeah. People say they want something, but when it comes down to it, they're gluten-free, like cake batter. Oh my God. If you haven't hit Stella's, you heard it here first. Their cake batter's fire, and they have gluten-free waffle cones. Get them. Oh my God, it's so good.
Sponsor.
Stella's.
They need to sponsor you.
Oh my gosh. I hit Stella's and then Zeke's Pizza. Come on, man. Like, how am I supposed to lose 10 pounds knowing Zeke's and Stella's are right next door to each other? Like, it's not possible. Oh, so my mouth is watering now. Like, it's so good.
Road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think it's really, we talk about development, we talk about how we're building communities and the tensions that live in Eagle. It's just like, I always encourage people, take a look at your spending, take a look at what your community looks like, and engage with not just your local officials, but engage with what they're doing in their comp plans. Like talk to your planning staff about what's legal, what's not. Is it legal for them to even deny this Chick-fil-A? Because like Idaho has strong property, private property rights.
Right.
Go find out the answers to those questions, but in the meantime, we're going to see what happens with this lawsuit because developers don't like people to tell them no, particularly when they believe the law is on their side.
Right. Right. And it's up to the judge.
And Eagle could pay for pay their attorney's fees for this.
Margaret Carmel, we are living in the future. This is, every time I talk to you, I get like, it's just so exciting. It's so complex.
Local news is exciting.
I think it is. And this is the stuff like the Secretary of State McGrain had a great point, which is like everybody pays attention to the national stuff. But if you ask them what they're most upset about in their life, it's like traffic or something. And it's like, well, who affects traffic here? ACHD. Do you know who your ACHD commissioners are? No? Well, maybe you should consider that. If the thing that's affecting you most is local stuff, and it doesn't have the production value that national stuff has. But man, like there are things happening, and
Totally.
I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on today.
Yep.
I know you've been doing a ton of work today. Thanks for making it work. And let's do a follow-up when we find out what happens with Chick-Fil-A.
Okay, yes, and you can read all this stuff in my stories on boisedev.com.
Right. And what's your X handle?
It's ML Carmel.
Awesome. And you're not really on Instagram, but you are on X and then Facebook?
Yeah, Boise Dev is on Facebook.
Okay.
So if you get on, and then just going into our website, we have newsletters. We have all kinds of ways you can find our content.
Fantastic. Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.